All right, how heavy should an older guy be lifting? How heavy should an old man be lifting? Well, it's subjective to a degree, but there is a thing that happens to you when you reach a certain age, man. There is a reality to it where, obviously, as everybody's aware, I don't think anybody would dispute that your hormone production of all sorts, declines, huge decline in some hormones. Growth hormone, for example, huge decline when you get to a certain age. Now, when is that age? Who knows? Let me fix this camera here. Let me do a little Jerry Ward adjustment here. That'll do. So, all right, when does it happen? Who knows? It's different with every man is different. It's got a lot to do with a lot of things, genetics, how you've taken care of yourself, what you've been exposed to, shit you don't even realize you're exposed to. You know, the area in which you live or have lived most of your life. It's got to do with so many intangibles that you can't even, actually narrow it down. But what happens is once your growth hormone production reaches a certain minimum, once it crosses this line and falls below that minimum, wherever that may lie in whatever man, because there's a lot of other factors, your ability to uptake that growth hormone and to make proper use of it, across the threshold and fucking variety and cornucopia of influences that it has if all things are right, especially when you're younger. So once it dips below a certain level, you lose that connective tissue insurance, that protection that you had, especially with connective tissue, with ligaments and tendons, especially. And when it drops down below that point, that's it. Now you find yourself in a precarious state. And if you don't believe this, and you say to yourself, well, I'm an old guy and I'm still lifting heavy, well, you have to understand that I came into this whole bodybuilding bullshit late, because I was involved in other sports, far involved in other sports. And the actual problems that I had in my youth that actually directed me to have an interest to pursue these other avenues, those problems were far solved and remedied by the time I came into bodybuilding. By the time I came into bodybuilding, I only got into it because it was, initially I got into it to help me progress further in my sport, in my craft, which was fighting, to help me move up in weight classes, to help me have a little more strength and a little bit more power, hopefully, because I was always a smaller guy. I didn't really have a height problem, but I was just a thin guy, naturally very thin guy. I didn't like that. I didn't dig that. So that's why I got into it. So initially I was doing both. And then the bodybuilding thing and the building muscle and getting bigger became intoxicating because I saw results. I responded well as a natural just to training and learning my way through nutrition, which I really didn't know shit when you look back on it, but I knew enough. I knew enough to make that initial progress and to keep me interested so that I pursued and learned more and took it farther. And I got to the point where I was looking better, I was feeling better about my appearance, but I wasn't getting any bigger. And I figured it out, what it was that the workload with both interests at the same time was outpacing my nutrition. So the solution would have been for me to eat more, right, to increase my calories. But I didn't understand all of that shit, believe it or not, back then. So I just figured, well, less activity. Something has to go. So now I've been doing the fighting shit I've been doing for, I don't know, Jesus, probably, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 years, and pretty hard and heavy. So maybe probably more than that. Maybe about 15 or 16 years straight. And so the having the muscle was a new thing to me. It was a new thing, and this other thing was an old thing. I was already really, very highly skilled at it, very successful at it, had quite the reputation from it. had amassed a lot of wins, and I didn't have any confidence issues with any of that shit. So I thought, well, you know, that shit's old. I'm liking this, so I'm going to back off of some of that so that I can direct all my energy into this and see if that gives me more progress, you know, in the muscle building. And it did. It did. But eventually, I got to a place where I was at my prime. At my prime, I'm going to tell you right now, at my prime, I was 44. And I hung out there for about 3 years. So 44, 45, 46, I think even 47, maybe. You know, and the magazines every year I was 44. Every fucking year I was still 44 because there was a discrimination against, you know, it was ageist to a degree. So every year I was 44. Do you realize nobody even called that? Nobody ever called me out on it. You know, I'd be interviewed by somebody 2 years after a prior interview, and they would say, "You're 44, aren't you?" And I'd be like, "Yep, 44." You know, by then, of course, I'm 46. So I was always 44. But I came into it late. So I lifted hot and heavy, you know, powerlifting style lifting for, you know, because I was a strength guy. I loved that moving heavy iron and being strong and being really big. So there came a time where when I crossed that threshold, I mean, I made it a good ways. I was still going really heavy probably. I don't think I started getting injuries until that very last year. So I'm probably 46 or 47 years old. All of a sudden in that year, from the way that I lifted, and I trained with a lot of world record holding powerlifters at that time, were the real fucking deal. They were the #1 fat cat, you know, in whatever their thing was. And I didn't train note for note, blow for blow, everything that they did, but we would train very similarly, and then we would part ways through part of the workout. You know what I mean? I'd go off and do more bodybuilding, volumizing shit, and they would continue on their powerlifting thing, and with whatever that program was at the time. But initially, all the big 3 lifts, I trained with those guys, you know, initially. And that was intoxicating, lifting the heavy weight. Loved it. So when all of a sudden, you know, like 1 month, I'm lifting mad heavy. Every lift, no problem. It's what I do. Then all of a sudden, like the next month, shit starts coming apart and tearing. Not just once, several times. I think the very first thing I tore was right quad, inside quad, snapped off and come up my leg. Snapped up my leg like a rubber band. That was the first injury. Then I tore a lat. One of my lats is misshapen from the other one. When I build up enough mass, it kind of sort of camouflages it some, but when I'm not as big, and like even right now, it's very visible. If I point it out to you, or if you know to look for it, you'll see pictures I've put up recently, lat spreads and shit. You can see it. You can see it if you're looking for it. You can see it. I'm pretty good at hiding it. You can see it if you're looking for it. I tore a rear delt. So I started thinking, what the fuck are all these tears now? These are the same weights that I normally just handle with authority. What the fuck is going on? That's exactly what it was. My growth hormone had finally, just finally, fallen below a particular level, and I was opening myself, making myself available for injury, you know, with that heavy weight now. Heavy weight that used to be nothing for me just to move, same weights, same poundages, now they were fucking tearing me apart. And that's what that was. So it was very depressing and discouraging, and I had to learn to lift differently. So even today, you know, like right now I'm pushing the boundary of how much weight I should be lifting right now. Because the true reality, in my opinion, is nothing gives you that density, that thickness, like heavy weight does. Nothing. You can still get big with all that volume shit and all that. Sure you can. But my real honest opinion is a lot of that shit is made up for by guys with chemistry. I'm not putting any of it down, because maybe they're not getting injured like I was getting injured, right? So there might be something to be said for that. But a lot of that's made up for with chemistry. And of course, if you're augmenting or supplementing with growth hormone, you're going to be okay. You know, and when I competed, I was using growth hormone. And then when I didn't use growth hormone anymore, you know, it was okay for a while, but then that's when I crossed that threshold. So what I'm saying is, there's a place, and it's going to be, I've seen that it's different with every man. And you can go ahead and lift. You can use a lot of volume. You can use a lot of different pre-fatigue things. You can do giant sets. You can superset. There's a lot of other things that you can do to still generate enough intensity to build a lot of muscle without going too heavy. I have very good friends of mine that are older guys that they're not mad big, but they're big. They're muscular. They're bigger than a normal average dude. They look good. They're in shape. They mostly have abs all the time, and they always look good. They always look good, but they don't really get a lot bigger as time goes on because they don't challenge themselves with heavy weight. And they're happy with that, they're comfortable with that, and that's probably the right thing for them to be doing because, how are you going to find out if you're not supplementing with growth hormone? The way you're going to find out is shit is going to start tearing. Shit is going to start tearing. And I've mentioned this briefly before, and I've had other people, YouTube experts, disagree with that. They think it's all about, well, the form must have been compromised somewhere or whatever. And that's complete and utter bullshit because these dudes are the same dudes that lift every single day and honest to God are not lifting the weights that I lifted in my heyday. So, come on, man. Come on. Let's consider the fucking source. And they're nowhere near as old as me. And if they keep lifting the way they're lifting, maybe one day they'll find out. Anyway, that's what I just wanted to cover. If you're an older guy, just something to be aware of. It's a thing. It's real. It happens. If you're working for a living and all that sort of shit and you got to show up, for life every day, take care of you and yours, then maybe you can't afford to have some catastrophic muscle tear or rupture or something. If it's preventable. So if you're not supplementing growth hormone, you can get hurt no matter what anyway, but if you're not supplementing growth hormone, that's just one more thing to remember as you age. It may be wise to maybe learn to like working out without lifting that heavy, mad weight. Just a thought.